Off Leash Productions presents Daddy Longlegs by Mendy Sobel, read by Heather Henderson. Tommy was a nice little boy, not the kind who pulls legs off spiders. He watched them catch their flies and wasps, figuring a few cobwebs in the house were way better than getting stung by a yellowjacket. When a spider was somewhere it shouldn't be, like on his computer keyboard or in his breakfast cereal, he'd capture it in a water glass and carefully place it outside on a sword fern or rhododendron. He wasn't afraid of spiders, liked watching them, appreciated their strength and beauty. And they did make fast work of yellowjackets, so Tommy let them be. He was a nice little boy, not like his parents. Tommy's mother, Catherine Rousseau, was a genetic engineer. His father, Bill Acterley, had a Ph.D. in animal husbandry. They didn't share much time with Tommy, but they did share a dream. They dreamed that someday, by combining selective breeding with genetic manipulation, they would raise an animal species to sentience. They called the dream Uplift. They began years earlier with the obvious choices: dolphins and chimpanzees. After many failures and much frustration, they tried parrots, then dogs, then sea otters. Most recently, they'd been working on lizards. It didn't matter that most of their subjects died or that their failed experiments were euthanized. After all, they were just animals. Tommy wasn't an experiment. He was an accident. One night, when they thought they'd made a big breakthrough, one of the parrots had said, "Looks like rain." Bill and Catherine drank too much champagne and made Tommy right on the stainless steel dissection table. Humans often conceive their young in this manner. It turned out that the parrot was merely mimicking what he heard the janitor say every morning, something parrots have done since the dawn of their species, something certainly not attributable to Catherine's genetic tinkering or Bill's carefully researched inseminations. They fired the janitor, exterminated the parrot. Tommy wasn't so easy to get rid of. Tommy had his own bedroom and bathroom in the basement of the Rousseau-Acterley home. Catherine and Bill pretty much left him alone in the windowless apartment and certainly never came down to dust or vacuum. They had Teresa, their Guatemalan maid, for that, and she never went downstairs. Teresa was too afraid of spiders. Tommy spent lots of time in his shower. He liked pretending it was a spaceship, and the shower head and hot and cold water handles controlled the ship's thrusters, phasers, and photon torpedoes. It wasn't unusual for several different kinds of spiders, some with tiny heads and long, delicate legs, others with big, hairy bodies and short, thick legs, to take turns hanging from the tiled ceiling while Tommy showered. He'd appoint them pilot, chief engineer, or weapons officer and issue commands. "Captain Arachnid, all engines ahead full, warp factor 10. Chief Bugner, raise the shields. Lieutenant Webmaster, open fire." "Aye, aye, Captain," he'd answer for the silent spiders. He didn't mind that they never spoke for themselves. One winter morning, Tommy woke early for school, as he often did to give himself time for an extra long shower. He thought it was probably before sunrise, but without windows he couldn't tell for sure. Tommy took a yellow washcloth and wiped the sleepy sand from his eyes. Then he brushed his teeth, took off his pajamas, and pulled back the blue shower curtain. An unusually large, daddy-long-legged spider looked down at Tommy from a nearly invisible web high on the shower wall, a foot or so above the shower head. "Good morning, Daddy-Longlegs. How are you today?" No answer. Tommy shrugged. "Now stay up there, because if you swing down into the spray, you'll think you've just gone over Niagara Falls without a barrel." Tommy stepped inside and turned on the water. "All engines ahead, 1/2 impulse." Daddy Longlegs ignored him, began lowering himself dangerously close to the spray. Blowing on him gently from below, Tommy repeated, "I told you to stay up there, Daddy Longlegs. It's not safe." The spider began backing up, then surprised Tommy, dropping more than a foot in the blink of an eye. Caught by the spray, thin lifeline overmatched by the water's power, Daddy Longlegs plummeted to the shower floor, washed toward the drain. Tommy jumped back, then forward, shutting off the hot and cold water with both hands. Pooled water rushed forward, a dangerous rapids carrying the spider with it to a bottomless black hole. Crashing his right hand down on the drain's sharp metal lip, scooping water back toward his feet, Tommy caught Daddy Longlegs just before he disappeared forever. But in his hand, instead of the big brown body suspended trampoline-like from long, slender legs, the spider lay crumpled, motionless. And something else was wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, Tommy counted, then looked back at the drain just as an eighth slender, segmented leg balanced on the lip and washed over. Tommy looked down at Daddy Longlegs, examining him more closely, finding the place on his thorax where the right hindmost leg had been cleanly severed. A small amount of beige goo marked the spot. Wet, cold, naked, Tommy started shivering. Daddy Longlegs still didn't move. It was getting late now, time to fix breakfast, time to catch the school bus. Still, Tommy stood, wet, cold, naked, shivering, wondering what to do with Daddy Longlegs. Maybe he should euthanize him the way his parents did with sick and injured animals at the Institute. But Daddy Longlegs looked dead already, and Tommy didn't want to think about squashing him. And what if he were still alive? Tommy thought he remembered reading that spiders could survive losing a leg, thought he remembered seeing other seven-legged spiders in his basement. Stepping from the shower, Tommy gently placed Daddy Longlegs on the yellow washcloth, toweled himself dry, and hurriedly dressed. Too late for breakfast now. Catherine and Bill were already at the Institute breeding Gila monsters. Jumping up the stairs 2 at a time, snatching his jacket and house keys, running out the door and down to the corner, Tommy caught the bus just in time. When Tommy came home from school late that afternoon, he went straight downstairs to the basement. The washcloth was right where he left it, but Daddy Longlegs was gone. He looked all around the bathroom's floor, then walls, and finally ceiling. And there, directly over his head, close to but not in the shower, hung an unusually large Daddy Long-legged spider. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, Tommy counted, pointing his finger from leg to leg. "It's you all right, Daddy Longlegs. You're amazing." And he was amazing, Tommy thought. Could a human plunge over Niagara Falls, nearly drown, lose an arm or leg, then climb the outside of the Empire State Building with no ropes? Why, humans probably couldn't climb a flight of stairs if they lost so much as a toe. If spiders wanted to, they could probably rule the world. Stripping off his clothes and stepping into the shower, Tommy turned on the water full force. Because of the incident with Daddy Longlegs, he never did get to finish his morning shower. "Ahead, warp factor 9, Daddy Longlegs!" Daddy Longlegs crawled back and forth across the tile ceiling, using his 7 legs just as gracefully now as he once used 8. And this time he stayed well clear of the shower head and its powerful spray. "I knew it! You're smart, too! You learned your lesson!" And indeed, he had. Tommy was happy. Happy because Daddy Longlegs was alive. Happy because he loved all living things. And Tommy was excited, too. He couldn't wait until dinner so he could tell his parents all about Daddy Longlegs. But at dinner, Catherine and Bill didn't listen to Tommy. They had their own problems. "It was so cool. Only 7 legs, and he climbed all the way back up to the ceiling." "Use your salad fork, Tommy, and stop interrupting." That was Catherine. "Those damn bunny huggers. Haven't they got anything better to do?" That was Bill. 2 straight weeks of animal rights pickets, and today they spilled blood all over the front steps." "You're missing the point, Bill. I got another call from Celia Potter over at the National Science Foundation. They've been flooded with letters from humane societies and animal rights groups demanding they shut down the Institute. She said if this keeps up, we could lose our funding." Where do those idiots think all those great medical breakthroughs come from that keep them alive till they're 100? Where do they think their Kentucky Fried Chickens and Gucci handbags come from?" "You're still missing the point. We dropped our work on sea otters because of Greenpeace protests. We figured, okay, sea otters are cute, everyone loves watching them at the zoo, so we'll stop working with sea otters and switch to lizards. Lizards are ugly. Nobody likes lizards. So we start using lizards, and what happens? More protests, this time from Friends of the Desert." "So what is the point?" "The point is, we've got to find another species that meets all our criteria for uplift: intelligence, strength, ease of breeding, adaptability. But this time we've got to find a species that no one gives a damn about. Better yet, a species everyone dislikes." "Find a species no one can stand? That's your brilliant solution?" "Either that or sell the Lexus and apply for teaching jobs." Bill was a better scientist, but Catherine was the more practical of the two. "Spiders are strong and smart, too." "Tommy, I told you to stop interrupting." "No, really, Mom. This spider I was telling you about, Daddy Longlegs, he got caught in the spray from the shower, nearly drowned, lost a leg, and still climbed up to the ceiling. And he's smart, too. He won't go near the water now." Bill looked down at his salad. Catherine stared blankly at Tommy, started to tell him if he interrupted one more time he'd be sent downstairs without his dinner. Then Bill dropped his fork. "What? What is it?" "Spiders," Bill said. "What about them?" "Think about it, Catherine. They're incredibly strong for their size, strong enough and smart enough to kill wasps 10 times bigger and more mobile than they are. Web spinning alone lets them do things no other species could dream of. Adaptability? Hell, they live everywhere on the planet, from the Sahara Desert to the Arctic under the most extreme conditions imaginable. Ease of breeding? My God, Catherine, instead of killing ourselves splicing genes to breed one set of twins, spiders will give us hundreds of genetically identical siblings every time they reproduce, with none of the expense, none of the maintenance of mammals and reptiles. And best of all, no one gives a damn about spiders. Most people hate them." "But what about size? The whole point of uplifting another species to sentience is so they can work for humans doing things humans can't or won't do. Spiders may be strong, but even 1,000 of them couldn't, let's say, process toxic waste. If you splice in a few growth genes from a larger species, even some human genes, and I do a little selective breeding, we could create a 4-foot spider in no time. All we need to start is one unusually large spider." "Daddy Longlegs is really big, and he's really smart." Catherine and Bill looked at Tommy. They'd forgotten he was at the table. "Where is Daddy Longlegs, Tommy? Can you get him for us?" Tommy hesitated. "You won't hurt him, will you?" Bill, sounding exasperated, started to say something. Catherine held up her hand, silencing him. "Of course not, Tommy. Now why don't you go get Daddy Longlegs, is that what you called him, and bring him to your father and me. And be really gentle. We wouldn't want to upset him." And so it happened, to win the love of his parents, Tommy betrayed his friend. Bill and Catherine were correct about almost everything. The next day they held a press conference, announced the Institute would no longer run uplift experiments on lizards. From now on, they would use only spiders, and the protesters all went away. After all, humans can't stand spiders. As for Daddy Longlegs, he barely noticed when they extracted a small amount of genetic material from one of his remaining legs, quite enjoyed it when he was presented with an unusually large female of his species, understood at the deepest core of his being when, after mating, she slashed his abdomen, leaving him for dead. No one can say what he thought about as he lay dying in a glass jar at the Institute. Certainly there was no way he could see what the future would hold for his offspring. Bill didn't quite get it right about breeding a 4-foot spider, but within 2 years he and Catherine celebrated their first 3-footer. And with 2 more egg sacs filled with her genetically identical brothers and sisters, they were so happy they might have made Tommy a little brother or sister if they hadn't learned from the mistake caused by their last celebration. And they never did succeed in uplifting spiders. You see, spiders, like all living things, have always been intelligent, curious, perceptive, aware, conscious, sentient, whatever you want to call it. They only lacked one quality. It was Catherine who inadvertently provided the missing ingredient by splicing a microscopic piece of growth-stimulating genetic material from human gene number 6 into the double helix of the latest crop of spiders, unaware the DNA also contained instructions for that most human of characteristics, ambition. That's how it came to pass that the great-granddaughter, countless generations removed of Daddy Longlegs, left the Uplift Institute late one night with 2 unhatched sacs of her siblings, setting out to realize her ambitions. It remains unclear whether the deaths of Catherine Rousseau and Bill Acterley came about as a result of her plans, or whether, before she left that night, the 3-foot spider merely wished to satisfy her curiosity about what happens when one pulls the legs off a human. And Tommy's fate? Well, that's for you to decide. For as you know, in pursuing our ambitions, we've adopted many human institutions, including trial by a jury of your peers. While that may work well enough within our species, I must remind you Tommy no longer has any peers. It is precisely because of his special relationship with the first, with Daddy Longlegs, preserved generation after generation in our genetic memories, that we have spared him till the last. As his appointed defender, I believe I can do no better than remind you of these things you already know. In closing, let me say that Tommy did ask to see Daddy Longlegs again, and thinking he would never notice the difference, Bill and Catherine showed Tommy another spider in his place. But Tommy counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and knew his parents were false, knew at last they did not love him, knew he could never love them again. So as you retire to your webs to decide the fate of the last of his species, I will leave you with the thoughts with which I began. Tommy was a nice little boy, not the kind who pulls legs off spiders.